Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. Welcome to this. It's a special video I'm making about Project Blue Book. Now, as regular viewers you all know, I've already made a video about Project Blue Book. It was the live stream that I did a few weeks ago. Now, this is a second video about Project Blue Book because basically I want to cover the programme again in a new light, compared to what it was in the original, when I did the original live stream. Because when I did the original live stream, basically I'd only seen 2 episodes. It was just after the actual programme started. Now, a lot has happened in the series, which I think means I see it differently now. And indeed, I'll probably do another live stream when the series is finished, when all 10 episodes are done. I'll probably do a second live stream or another video like this one about that. Now, the Project Blue Book TV series, I think, is indicative of what is so far proving to be a very exciting year in ufology. Now, as you know, 2017 ended with enormous hope, with the ATIP revelations, and the Stars Academy was launched, things like that. Over the course of 2018, I think it's fair to say that the TTSA phenomenon has stagnated. It doesn't mean it's over forever, but it means that it's basically, it feels like it's grinding to a halt. I mean, I'm still getting their emails, I'm still getting their advertisements for merchandise and things like that. But basically, there's been no real big breakthrough for TTSA now for a whole year. 2019, I think, is starting to sound more exciting, and I think Project Blue Book is a symptom of that, I hope. There's other things as well, such as some of the things that Trump is up to. Could Trump be the disclosure president, etc. I'll cover that in a future video. But Project Blue Book is really quite, this TV series is remarkable. And since I did the live stream, I really actually found that it's more remarkable than I thought when I did the live stream. It really, really is. Just to remind you that Project Blue Book is a real thing. And some of the characters in the TV series are actually real people. Specifically, especially the star, the central character, who is Professor J. Allen Hynek. Now, he's a real person. He was the scientific advisor to Project Blue Book in reality, and indeed, from 1947 onwards, Hynek was working in the UFO field. He was with Project Grudge and Project Sign. Project Blue Book was the last and most ambitious of these 3 projects, and Hynek was the scientific advisor throughout. And now Hynek is famous because he himself, his position changed over the course of the project. The 17 years that Project Blue Book was running, Hynek changed. He went from being a debunker, a skeptic, to being a believer, a true believer. Yeah. The question of what radicalised Hynek, I'm not sure, and that's something we'll be able to explore. The real reason he's radicalised. I mean, in the TV series, I mean, he plays an open-minded role from the outset. I mean, this series is set in 1952 at the start of Blue Book. Hynek plays. He basically has his open-minded, intellectually honest position from the start. The Project Blue Book ended in 1969. There was the Condon Committee and things like that, and they said basically there are no such things as aliens. There's no evidence aliens exist. There's no extraterrestrial civilization engaging the human race. It's all not true. Everything is explicable. There's no such things as UFOs. And this was kind of their litany. It was their mantra. They repeated over and over again. This is their standard go-to response. Even in 2011, Grant Cameron's petition, the White House petition too, it was saying we've got no evidence there's any UFOs, etc., etc. No evidence at all. We know because we studied them for all these years. It's strange they keep saying that over and over again, because they spent millions and millions of dollars and they employed dozens of people, and this is in real life now. The US government dedicated all these years to studying the UFO phenomenon, and every time they were asked, well, it doesn't exist, it's not true. It's mythical, it's nonsense, it's fantasy. Ask yourself this: Would a project investigating Santa Claus or unicorns have been so extensive? Exactly. Now, one thing I should say about one thing that's become very clear in Project Blue Book, it's very different from Project UFO. Do you remember me telling you about Project UFO? This is his original series from the late 1970s about Project Blue Book. It's called Project UFO, and it had these two guys, fictional guys, who went around investigating UFO reports, and it was pretty good actually. You can watch it online, get it on YouTube now. All 2 seasons you can get on YouTube, and it was actually pretty good. It's kind of like a whodunit. So at the end, you find out there'd be a UFO sighting. Sometimes it would turn out to be a hoax. Sometimes it would turn out to be real. Sometimes it would be some delusion, some mistaken identity. But it was a kind of a whodunit, so you had to kind of follow the 2 detectives as they worked it out as they went along. One thing was certain though, it was quite a light-hearted drama. There was never any discussion of cover-ups and things like that. It didn't occur in Project UFO. Project Blue Book is very different. It has a very subversive theme. It's far darker in tone. It's much more like the X-Files in that respect. Indeed, when I'll read some reviews soon, and this point is often made by the critics. Now, it's as I said, what's interesting about Project Blue Book is it does deviate from the historical narrative, but it is actually strange because even it's based on true stories. The Project Blue Book was real, but on the other hand, you have things like Majestic 12, which was also real. So the producers of this, and the writers and directors of Project Blue Book have very, very skillfully intersected these 2 realities. It's very clever how they've done it. Really is. And I mean, maybe you have to be a UFO tinfoil hat wearing nut to appreciate this. Perhaps. Anyway, let's see what the critics have been saying about it. The critics, yes. What have they been saying about Project Blue Book? Let's look at what they say before I tell you what I think. Well, first of all, we're going to go through some of the reviews of Project Blue Book, the TV series. And strangely enough, I should begin already. I couldn't find a review in The Guardian. I was hoping to do like a Guardian, do my Guardian voice, man, like I usually do with these reviews. I think it's quite amusing. They haven't mentioned it. The last time The Guardian even referred to UFOs is in 2017. It's an article by, guess who? Nick Pope. Yeah. That's just typical, I think, of The Guardian and the sort of political stance they promote, that they ignore the subject altogether, and that's very, very typical. So we're going to begin with the Tory graph. Yes, indeed. Now I'm going to put on my Telegraph voice. Yes, so I do have a voice for this. Anyway. Here we go. This is the funny thing is, right? This article is actually not a review. I should correct. This was written in October 2018, so it was written a couple of months before the thing was released. New show explores if U.S. Air Force hushed up UFO sightings in Project Blue Book. Were little green men from outside our solar system really dropping in to visit us in flying saucers in the 50s and 60s? Well, yes, they were, and in fact. They're still doing it, and they did it before the 50s and 60s as well. There were so many UFO sightings during the period that the US Air Force created a top-secret task force to investigate Project Blue Book, which a new History Channel show is to explore. Not exactly. I mean, well, partly. There's, as I explained in the live stream, there's a diversions from the actual history of the real Project Blue Book. I'm going to do another show about this, actually, probably another live stream when the series is over, and I'll go into that in more detail. Were the government really looking for the truth or seeking to hide it? Well, in the series it's very obvious they're seeking to hide it. That's actually revealed to the viewer straight away in the first scene of the first act. I mean, well, in the first scene you have Majestic 12. There's 12 guys in suits sitting around a round table, in darkness and everything, saying quite openly, UFOs are real. We need to reduce public interest in it. There's too many movies. There's too many news stories. We need to put the lid on this. They did the same thing to crop circles actually in the late 80s. That is revealed in the very, very first scene of the film. In the very first act, when Hynek is being approached for a job by Quinn, he says quite clearly, he says, we need you to tell the public the truth. They don't exist. I'll say more about that later on, but basically that is, I think, close to the truth of what Project Blue Book was for, and I'll say more about that later. But this really doesn't say a lot, because this particular article here by this particular article from the Telegraph actually doesn't say much, because it's, like I say, it's a preview. It's not an actual review. I want to actually find out what people are saying, so I'll leave this one particular one there, and we'll move on to another one. This is from Variety. Now, how do Variety people speak? I think they sort of talk like this, perhaps. I think that's a Variety voice. I'll do this one anyway. The most surprising thing about Project Blue Book is it took so long to become a TV show in the first place. Actually, no. As I said in the live stream, there was a Project UFO, which was made in the late 70s. As it will tell you itself, it's the top of every episode, history's new scripted drama is based on true events, or at least recorded incidents of possible UFO sightings, and the Air Force's subsequent investigations during the 1950s and 60s. Oh dear. My Variety voice sounds a bit like Hinge and Bracket, sorry about that. Each week, a new case sparks new intrigue about alien life and the government conspiracy to cover it up. Yes, it does. I mean, the government conspiracy is an essential part of the plot. It's something that's not even speculated on. It's revealed immediately. All the while, the Cold War looms ominously, infusing everyone with a deep unease and paranoia they can't shake, no matter how hard they try to stave it off. Well, that's true. In this way, Project Blue Book sets itself up as a period piece X-Files. That's actually a very perceptive notion. I mean, it's one that has occurred to me, and I'll explain how similar this is. It is actually very, very similar to X-Files, and it just gives a brief overview of the entire series. There we go. This is the mismatched nerd meets macho dynamic is a classic. All right. Yeah, it's the Quinn. I mean, this is the thing that there's some good sort of chemistry between Quinn and Hynek. Quinn is it's really typical of TV series actually, where you get the old cop, young cop type person. I mean, Quinn is like this young chap. He's an Air Force officer, and he is sort of like like the young cop in many of these TV series. Hynek is this crusty old professor. Well, he's about 50. He's in his early 50s, I'd say, and he is kind of the he's totally different. He's this academic. He has trouble coping with the action scenes, whereas Quinn copes them very well. Like where they're being shot at one point, Quinn says, "It's all right. After the next bullet, he's got to reload." Hynek is like ducking behind his car to avoid the bullets. But it says the chemistry doesn't spark enough to become truly memorable. Okay, well, maybe that's true. But the thing is that the Duchovny Anderson's Mulder and Scully thing is just too. That's just too ingrained now, and it's kind of. It's just too classic, I think. They go on to say that Ksenia Solo, the actress who plays Susie, she's wasted. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's some feminist thing. I don't know, but I think she does her particular role very well. She plays this seductress, this seductress spy. She plays it with great aplomb. It says here, these overarching plot lines work hard to establish a show outside Quinn and Hynek's research. Neither is quite compelling enough to accomplish the goal. Well, I don't know about that. I think that's unfair. As I'll explain in a little while, I'm very impressed with it. But that's anyway. That there is Project Blue Book, and it says it gives you a list of cast of characters. Neil McDonough and Michael Harney, I should say, very, very good in this. They play the two generals who are in Majestic 12. The Majestic 12 characters are all fictitious, or of course they're the real Majestic 12 had had named individuals of real people. But they do it very well as these really hardline UFO cover-up enthusiasts. They do that very well. The show, I should point out, is the actual crew has some big names in it as well. The biggest is Robert Zemeckis. Now, he's the executive producer, and he's very, very well known for directing films such as Back to the Future and Forrest Gump. He's a very good director as well, very acclaimed, and he is basically executive producing this particular series. I mean, they have a different director for every program, or at least they rotate the directors. I think there's some directors and some writers that write more than one episode, but that's interesting. That so this is not a B movie. This is mainstream, very mainstream indeed. So now we move on to the classic movie critic site. Well, it's an aggregator actually. It's an aggregator of film reviews, and it is Rotten Tomatoes. And how do the Rotten Tomatoes voices go? I think it's probably something like this. Yeah, it's a Rotten Tomatoes voice, that is. So let's have a look at it, shall we? Critics' consensus. Project Blue Book will likely intrigue fans of the paranormal with its loose adaptation of historically unexplained phenomena. But this buttoned-down series lacks the narrative verve to appeal beyond the true believers. Now, things I don't know if that's the case, because, as I've said, I can't see Project Blue Book from any perspective other than that of a true believing, tinfoil hat wearing, sky watching UFO loon, so-called. I can't step outside that perspective, that viewpoint, to another place to look at it, any more than I can fly up into the sky and look at something from above like a bird. It's something that, I mean, I don't know, would it appeal to people who don't believe in UFOs and people who are just like so normies who just are not into it at all? I mean, that's the question, isn't it? How would a non-UFO paranormal conspiracy theory person view Project Blue Book? How would they interpret it? I mean, it's a question, isn't it? I mean, I suppose we just have to ask someone, wouldn't we? Somebody who is not. I mean, unfortunately, most of the people who watch this channel are exactly like me. They are believers in these various phenomena, or they've come to the conclusion that they're real. For someone who's not like that, somebody who's a straight-laced, mainstream, not a conformist, never disbelieving a thing you see on the news kind of person, they might. Who knows what they think? Perhaps we should ask one of them. There are a few who still do watch my channel who are like that. Over to you, Steve Mumbling. And now finally, IndieWire. Now I've not actually, IndieWire. I've not actually done a review from IndieWire before. Because as I said, I can't. All the usual ones are not there. The Guardian's not there. Telegraph only has like a preview. This is Project. And what does the IndieWire voice sound like? I don't know. Maybe Indian, because it's indie. I don't know. Alright. I'll say Indian. Project Blue Book reviews. History's UFO drama is the X-Files, dulled by its time and its lack of skepticism. I see. Dulled by time. Alright, dulled by time and its lack of skepticism. I don't know about that. The truth is right there in front of Aidan Gillen's face, but his history series doesn't go out of its way to help anyone believe. I don't know, you see, because like I said before, I already believe. But I mean, the comparison with the X-Files is obvious. It really, really is. But it just gives let's have a look. It just gives a preview of the actual. Program. Oh, excuse me. As he goes all over America explaining away different alien sightings every week because he wants to be recognized for disproving the existence of flying saucers. That's not actually correct. Hynek doesn't want that, you see. Hynek is told, it's kind of a mandate in the job which is given to him in various obvious and very subtle ways. I mean, like I said, when Quinn approaches him and says, we want you to investigate and explain to the American public the truth. They don't exist. So he is told from the start very explicitly that is the mandate. That is the foregone conclusion. It is the kind of like foundational principle of Project Blue Book. And indeed, there may be some overlap here with reality, which I'll say more probably in a future program about this. But Hynek actually, as I explain, he has a different. As I'll explain in a minute, Hynek has other ideas, and it says it's too dull and ultimately too unconvincing. I don't think it is. I don't know. I think that's unfair. I mean, obviously, the IndieWire people may think, I don't know, maybe they don't believe in UFOs. Maybe that's the whole thing, isn't it?
Based on Hynek's investigations into the existence of UFOs, this new History Channel series bounces to a new case every week. Yes, but there is a story arc. I mean, it's two things. Each episode has a self-contained plot, but then there is the perennial plot that goes through the entire series. This story arc involving the cover-up, involving the various characters and how they interact, and there's things like that. Oh, it goes on like this and says oh, they complain about the hang on. They complain about some of the special effects. Oh, good grief! Have they ever watched Blake Seven? Oh. Anyway, it goes on and on like this. Let's have a look. Conversations are stilted, polite to the point of nausea. Oh no, it's quite good. When the son shows up shouting for his father, bragging about his accomplishment, he's the kind of caricature Hollywood films created in the 50s before audience realised they were a figment of their faux perfect imagination. No, that's alright, that is true. But it's you know, were the producers of this programme required to embellish that or perhaps change that? I mean, the point is, that's kind of like, these are all subplots, quite unimportant subplots, like the Joel, the little boy, Hynek's son. Maybe he's a sort of typical, you know, early Hollywood little boy. So what? Was it necessary to put more imagination into those particular scenes when that's not really what Project Blue Book is about? I think they're nitpicking here. They really are. Oh, and hats play an important role here. While Hynek and Captain Quinn bop around looking for UFOs. Oh, the hats. Well, they wear hats. Thing is, what's the point there? I know they do some things where there's this interesting thing when they're being shot at, and in fact Quinn tells Hynek to draw the fire of the man, so he uses his last bullet before reloading by throwing his hat in the air. And they wear hats, but of course people did in those days. This is the early 50s. This is set. Men wore hats in those days. When they went out, you wore a trilby hat. Everyone did. And it says the men in every single male character in Project Blue Book wears a hat. Yeah, so what? People did. Oh, and there's the renegade. There's a chap who he actually appears in the first episode. He's a pilot who has an encounter in the first episode. He has this sort of cloth cap on. I don't know if it's the while. The most notable comparison is the X-Files. Each week, Mulder and Scully investigated various paranormal activity. The yin-yang dynamic. He's a believer, she's a skeptic. Alright, but that's... Here the partners are both skeptics, and the only clash is when the doctor wants more answers than the military officer. Well, actually, I don't think that's correct, actually, because Hynek, like the real Hynek, he sort of like switched from being a skeptic to a believer. And again, they say that the actress Ksenia Solo, who plays Susie Miller, is relegated to second or fifth fiddle far too often. If that's some sort of silly feminist thing, I don't know. I think she's excellent to play that role. That's this alluring agent, this seductress. She's brilliant. She's very, very good indeed. It's Project Blue Book asks us to invest in Dr. Hynek's doomed quest without giving us good reason to invest in the man himself. And what good is a tragedy without resonance? No. Well, first of all, we've only seen 6 episodes. I mean, it's possible. I'm considering that possibly the show will deviate very, very much from history to the point where there's some sort of disclosure. I don't know. Oh, we got Project Blue Book feels like the X-Files, light, only with a whole lot of indistinguishable men, and all the women are stuck in the sideline. Oh God, we're getting into feminism now, are we? Oh, absolute rubbish. Well, I wonder if this is The Guardian, actually. Someone from The Guardian writing for IndieWire. I should have done it in that voice, man. Yeah. It's this white male patriarchy. That's what it's all about, this Project Blue Book. Now, it's historically accurate. And as I've said before, you know, this attempt to force a balance with programs like this would be appalling. It would be incredibly unhealthy. And well, there are no other really decent reviews I could find or really detailed reviews of Project Blue Book I could find yet. Maybe there'll be more at the end of the series. And as I said, I'll probably do another video about Project Blue Book, the TV series.
Yeah, well, by the way, apologies for the silly accents, but it's all about, when I'm reading these reviews, I need people who are listening and watching to realise when I'm speaking and giving my commentary and when I'm reading from the text. So that's why I put on those accents when I'm reading reviews, just to let you know. Those of you who watch my movies will know this. Well, basically, as I said, Project Blue Book, it's set in 1952. The big UFO, the big late 1940s UFO flap is sort of inspired a massive UFO culture across the world, especially in the United States. There are movies coming out and things like that. And basically, in the very, very first scene, you're in the office of Majestic 12, a darkened conference room with guys in suits, and they're around this big circular table. There's 12 seats. There's a shot from above. You can clearly see there's 12 seats. And they're saying, we don't know what are we going to do to stop these people? These people, like, they're all getting involved in this. We ourselves don't know what we're dealing with here, but we know it's real, etc. So you're told from the very start there's a cover-up. From the very, very beginning, very, very first scene, you're told there's a cover-up. And then what happens is, there's this guy, Captain Michael Quinn, and he's the guy who recruits Hynek. Now, Captain Michael Quinn, Air Force intelligence officer, trained in psychological warfare, and in fact, when he's with Hynek, when he first meets Hynek, he admits that he's using psychology on him. And that's very important, you see, because Quinn what he does is he goes up to Hynek and he says, the whole country is suffering from mass hysteria. We need to do a special investigation to bring a bit of rational thought and scientific level-headedness into the American public. So I want you to come with me, and we're going to prove the public the truth. UFOs don't exist. And they sort of like they toast each other and that. It's like, so they start off with that foregone conclusion: UFOs don't exist. See, this is the point. Now, Captain Quinn, is technically Hynek's sidekick, and as I explained in the reviews, there's a kind of old cop, young cop dynamic between the two of them, which you see in a lot of the detective series, and I think they do it quite well. Two very, very different kinds of guys. There's the stuffy academic and the macho military guy and things like that. You know, they're a good contrast of characters. That's what's clear is though that you know it straight away even before it's kind of revealed. But Quinn is chivying Hynek every time they go and investigate something to basically to say, oh well, it was just an owl with the Flatwoods case. Oh, it's just some water birds flying over, some waterfowl, plovers, I think they were, flying over in a V formation. That's what the Lubbock lights were. These are famous, real UFO cases. And Hynek, he goes along with this. I mean, there's this scene out of the Flatwoods case where he presents an owl in a cage. He shows it to people. He says, "Look, see, it's an owl. That's what they saw. It wasn't an alien. It was an owl." And in the final scene, he's sitting at the table with the suited guys in the dark conference room. He's saying, Dr. Hynek, thank you very much. And they hand him a big check. He's been paid. So you see what's happening now. They're paying him for this sort of thing. But it's pretty clear that there's one point where General Harding, who's the Majestic guy, he's in Majestic 12, and he's basically running the whole show, which of course again is fictional. But I say it's an intersection of two realities. He actually approaches Quinn, and he actually bollocks him because he thinks Quinn is being too soft on Hynek, and he gives him this reprimand. And he says, we brought you into this." Talking about Quinn, to write reports and close cases. Now start writing them and start closing them. So basically, he's putting pressure on him to put pressure on Hynek to stop. Don't speculate. Just look for the non-ET explanation and just write that down. Now Hynek is a bit of a wild horse though. He's a bit of a bucking bronco, and he's not going along with the party line. Quinn's job this is why Quinn is chivying him to stay on message every time, but Hynek is refusing. Now I've got to apologise for the spoilers here. It's important to explain this to you. Hynek remains intellectually honest. He remains open-minded. like with one of the cases, I think especially with the Lubbock Lights, he's going, hang on, this explanation doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And Quinn goes, Doc, the case is closed. We told you. It's plovers. We told you. Now, what's interesting about the Lubbock Lights episode? That's episode 3. Is that there's a scene in it where Quinn and Hynek both personally encounter the Lubbock Lights. It flies over. There's this big electromagnetic effect which switches the car off and everything, makes everything electrical. And now they can't deny it. They can't deny it's real. So what MJ12 do is they lie to Quinn and Hynek. What they do is they take him to the conference room and they say, this is so far above your need to know. You might as well be on the moon. And it's this dark and there's this really dark and it's a dark atmosphere, and there's this sinister music, and they hand Quinn and Hynek this folder. You open it up. You think it's going to be something about UFOs and aliens, but it's an experimental aircraft, top secret. We're testing it. That is what you saw. That's your UFO. Now, this is very, very interesting because you've probably seen my. I've done several videos now, and I've done an article, a review as well, of the book Mirage Men by Mark Pilkington, and indeed the film, the accompanying documentary film. Mirage Men the claim of Mark Pilkington, the author of Mirage Men, I've spoken to the author himself, is that the modern UFO culture, and indeed modern sightings and everything associated with it, is essentially a form of neo-mythology which has been deliberately created. It's been deliberately created by government intelligence operations. So UFOs, whether they exist or not, and Pilkington I think is very much a skeptic in that respect, the fact is that the UFO phenomenon itself has, in a sense, is a work of fiction. A work of real-life fiction, and people within it, people like me, are essentially either dupes of that fiction, or they are creators of the fiction working for the government as part of PSYOPs. There's many problems with that thesis, as I've explained to him, and indeed in my review. What Pilkington I think is suggesting is that it's designed, the whole UFO phenomenon, where people, whenever you see strange things in the sky and the media cover it and say it's a UFO and things like that, that whole thing is intended actually to launder far more down-to-earth secret aviation projects. So it's not actually aliens up there, it is spy planes like the U-2 and the SR-71, and more recently the Aurora, which is speculated to exist, and various other strange, unusual aircraft, modern aircraft, which the government is trying to keep secret from potential enemies. In the Cold War it was the Soviet Union. Now it's other countries. It's Russia as well. But now the whole idea is that people will go out and they say, "Oh look, there's a flying saucer in the sky. Look at that." And people, you go and you report this to the government. Now, if what the person saw was actually one of their secret aircrafts being tested. But what would you say to him in that situation? Now, according to Pilkington, the right thing to do would be to encourage him to say, yes, indeed, you saw a creature from the planet Zartog flying that. Yeah, gee him up, encourage him. Yes, it's an alien. It's an alien. It's not a secret aircraft. Okay, it's an alien. It's an alien. It's an alien. So that is basically what Pilkington is saying in the book, and it's actually quite a fashionable idea now. Many other people have kind of jumped on this bandwagon. But there's a big problem with this hypothesis, a very, very big problem, which I mentioned in my review. It's a very risky gambit to draw someone's attention towards something with the ultimate objective of deflecting it away, this sort of magician's sleight of hand thing. Just think how it could backfire. There's no guarantee. If you're drawing people, say, according to Pilkington, people who go to Area 51 essentially are being played. They're having a very, very clever four-dimensional psychological chess game played against them. To actually to make them believe there really are aliens out there. But the problem is, if you're putting out stories that aliens are there, more and more people are going to come pouring into Area 51, and sooner or later someone's going to see it and say, no, that's a spy plane. And indeed, that's already happened with Area 51. In fact, if you go to the Dreamland Resort page, they are totally anti-UFO. Totally. And you go to Little Alien and places like this, only about half the visitors who go to Area 51 now are actually ufologists. The other half are people who are defence analysts, aviation journalists, military enthusiasts and things like that, trying to spot the latest secret weapon in the US arsenal. So this is one example of what I'm talking about here. It's like it can't. This is why I don't think Pilkington is correct, and what we're dealing with is essentially a double bluff. In other words, aliens are real, and what Pilkington has described is actually a conspiracy to cover up the fact that it's aliens. You see what I mean? Aliens. Yeah. It's like, I think I've made this point in another recent video, but it's as if, if you're in a village hall and you've hidden some diamonds underneath the stage, there's several people you know are in the village looking for the diamonds, and they come into the village hall. There's several ways you can deal with that. Now, what Pilkington's idea is, what the most sensible thing to do is to walk to the other end of the room from the stage, where the kitchen is, and the little hatch where they serve the teas, and say, "Excuse me, everybody, there's a diamond buried under my feet." And so everyone comes pouring over and to the place where you're indicating. But it's only a matter of time before some of them says, "Hang on a minute, this guy's playing us. This guy's playing us for fools. The diamond must be someone in here. Let's go and look elsewhere within the village hall." Eventually, they're going to find the diamond under the stage, aren't they? So that's where I think Pilkington is wrong. And it's what's interesting about Project Blue Book is there's a fictional representation of that criticism that I've made of Pilkington. That's the first time I've seen this outside my own fiction, that this is done. This has been done. So I actually wonder what Mark Pilkington thinks of that, actually, because he's essentially. So what Magic are doing in this particular film is they're pretending that there's a secret aviation project to cover up the fact a real alien spacecraft was seen. You see what I mean? Very, very interesting indeed. Now, another thing that happens in episode 3 is Donald Kehoe turns up. Now, he's an early ufologist and author. He wrote a book called The Flying Saucers Are Real. He's forced to write disinformation, and this goes into other areas. There's a lot of, that there's something strange going on because Hynek's been spied on, and indeed his whole family are. And this woman called Susie, I mentioned in the original live stream, there's this woman called Susie, very beautiful, very charming young woman, who approaches Mimi, that's Hynek's wife. Apparently, she sort of bumps into her when they're out shopping and says, "Oh, hello," is very, very friendly and makes friends with her. And Mimi sort of really likes this woman because Mimi's lonely because Alan Hynek's away all the time and she's left on her own, and so she makes friends with this woman. And this woman, Susie, really ingratiates herself into Mimi's life, and it seems very innocent at first, but then I don't want to give too many spoilers away. I don't want to go into detail so much, but Susie tries to corrupt Mimi sexually. It's a classic honey trap, taking her out to premises of ill repute, shall we say, to try and where there's lots of licentiousness going on. Susie sort of makes passes at her and things like that. It's all very typical Count COINTELPRO honey trap tactics of intelligence, of winning over agents. It's the honey trap, as I said. It turns out later that Susie's Russian, so it looks like Soviet intelligence are watching this as well. It's really interesting. Now in episode 4, Werner von Braun comes into it, another real person, and he's of course with Operation Paperclip. He's a Nazi rocket scientist who ends up building space launch vehicles for NASA and indeed missiles for the US nuclear deterrent. And you see like a rocket test and things like that. And von Braun, it turns out, is involved in some kind of flying saucer experiment. Now we don't know if it's actually an alien reproduction vehicle or it's a Schauberger model that was built by the Nazis. But there's this very alarming scene where you see that this saucer being tested and it vanishes, and there's this guy inside who's been forced in there. He's a pilot or something, but he's been forced to do it. He's sort of like frog marched into the craft. Now, earlier on, you see the same thing again. You see, a UFO is seen flying over a farm or something. Hynek and Quinn go and investigate. They meet up with Von Braun. Von Braun says it's one of his rockets, but then they break into his laboratory and they find an alien in a tank. And then Von Braun says, "Oh, that's just a monkey." But you can see immediately it's not a monkey; it really is an alien. It's very so. You have, as I said, from the the idea of a cover-up going on is taken as read. It's revealed to the viewer immediately. You're told in the very first act of the first episode that aliens are real and the government are covering them up. This is why it's like the X-Files. Another interesting thing about episode 4 is you see a crop circle. Well, it's actually a circle in grass, but Hynek discovers a crop circle near where this supposed rocket test happened, and he realises it couldn't be that. But then, of course, Quinn is going on. See, Quinn then it all gets a bit strange because Quinn is sort of like gets into trouble himself for breaking into the base. But the Majestic side of things, the people on Majestic are still desperately trying to get Hynek, keep him on board with this project that they have, which is simply to debunk UFOs. They want to do an investigation and say they're doing an investigation, but it's actually not really an investigation. It's just they can say, "Look, we've investigated and it's not true." So they're trying desperately. It's a bit like Brexit, actually. They're trying desperately to do one thing while really doing the opposite. So they're trying to treat this so-called mass hysteria that Quinn talks about, and this thing that Quinn talks about, mass hysteria, and at the same time to say, well, we're bringing science into it, we're bringing technology, we're bringing an expert, an academic, and he says they're not real, but it's all a sham because the people running it know they're real aliens and they're trying to cover it up. Episode 5 is a strange one actually, because it's where you meet some people who've been abducted, and the whole concept of the mind control comes back into it. Do you remember in the live stream I was talking about the fairground, the abandoned fairground, that great cliche of horror movies that Hynek runs into? That comes back again, and the Fuller, the pilot from the first episode, you clearly see that he is actually been targeted by MK Ultra or something like it. And again, now that plot hasn't. There's this plot arc. It hasn't completely gone through that. We don't know exactly what's going on here. As I said, there are different episodes, each with its own self-contained stories. But there's this overarching plot device, the little plot line, which covers the entire series. Another thing about episode 5 is you get like there's these strange radio signals which seem to be connected to the abductees, which Hynek traces to a photographic studio where the woman running it is just being paid extra to broadcast these things from a tape recorder. She's like a cutout. She doesn't know anything about what's going on. She's not a part of MJ12. People are just giving her this money and say, "Could you please play this?" She doesn't even know what's on the tapes. It's really interesting, yeah. Episode 6 is the most recent one, and that is really a lot of new things are introduced there which haven't been in the show before. And now, for example, there's this scene where they're going to test a nuclear explosion, and they've got like this fake town with dummies and things which they build around. You see the same thing with Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Crystal Skull, where they nuke the fridge. Do you remember where he gets in the fridge? I love that bit. It's like that, but they find that someone starts the launch sequence for the missile or the bomb automatically, and the people in the control room can't shut it down. And there's technicians working on the test site, and they panic and they run, and they shut it down. It shuts down automatically just in time. Now, this is interesting because this actually happened in Russia during the days of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, where a missile launch facility went into red alert, and the automatic launch sequence started, and the technicians were desperately trying to stop it, knowing they would trigger World War III, knowing that there'd immediately be a massive exchange of weapons once one was launched. It turns out there's these green lights fly over, you see, and it seems they're connected with a fake launch. And then Majestic tried to tell everybody that they tell them it's like a Soviet drone. These are Soviet drones. And their first story is, it's just like meteors, and then they say it's Soviet drones, and it's like, and then something weird happens because Hynek meets up with this bloke, this strange man dressed in black, and it appears it's weird because he meets him when he's sort of in a semi-conscious state, and he seems to know him. Later on, they meet up in a church, and Hynek says, "Who are you?" And this guy gives him like secret advice, and I'm starting to wonder if he's actually human. He may be one of the men in black, or maybe an angel of some kind. This is odd because it's very similar to this is a very similar storyline to my Roswell trilogy, my own books. And I don't know that any of the people behind Project Blue Book actually read the Roswell trilogy and got the idea from that. I don't know, but it's interesting that this sort of concept comes up again. It really is. Now, it's clear in the sense that J. Allen Hynek is going through an awakening process, and it happens very quickly within the series, but in real life the same thing happened. Now, the question you've got to ask is, what was it that radicalised Hynek? There's several things that happened during those years he was investigating UFOs that turned him from a card-carrying sort of skeptic, James Randi, Michael Shermer type, into a basically, Steve Bassett, Ben Emlyn Jones type tinfoil hat wearing loony, or to words to that effect. You know what I'm talking about. And there's some very interesting insights actually in this. Now, people who listen to her Panwo Radio will know about this already, but this is a book that's it's just arrived and I've been flicking through it. It's called Sacred Corridors: Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Battelle, Memory Metal, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and UFO Cover-Ups. And this is a book by Dr. Irena Scott. And if you listen to her Panwo Radio, you'll know that I actually interviewed Dr. Scott, the author of this book, on the most recent show at the time of recording. Absolutely fascinating lady, and this book is fascinating. It's actually got photos in here. I probably won't show you them on camera actually. I'm not sure what the copyright status of them are, but basically there's exclusive photographs from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is very interesting because, in a sense, it's almost like the real Area 51. In other words, it could be that Wright-Pat is more important to the UFO cover-up than Area 51. The reason is Project Blue Book was based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and indeed some of the scenes in the TV series take place there. They're probably not filmed there, but they're set there. But there was like there's an inner base within the outer base, and Irena calls it like an inner Area 51. Where there's a lot of secret stuff, and she's taken photographs of some of the outside of these buildings. And there's like a dark windowless building. There's a so-called Blue Room, which is underground. And there's some. It's very interesting that another interesting thing about Wright-Patterson is that it's where the Roswell trail goes cold. The thing about the Roswell incident of July 1947 is there were two news stories. The first one came out and said it was a flying disc, and they say the U.S. Army Air Force has captured a flying disc. It's in the possession of the Army. The debris is being flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's where the technical data section was of Wright-Pat. Now, they even describe some of the wreckage. They say it's like a box kite. There's nothing else to it really. No real substantial engineering or anything they can spot. Now, so we know that the Roswell debris is taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and indeed, that's what you would expect because it is how much? I'm just checking the time. Okay. It is where you would have. It's where you'd have. That's where the technical data section is, where foreign material is always taken, such as any Soviet aircraft they pick up, or something like a stray MiG or something. They pick that up, or an old weapon of some kind they pick up from a battlefield. It's taken there for analysis and possible back engineering. That it was then after that, it was only after that they released the weather balloon story and said no UFOs. And according to Stephen Bassett, that's when the truth embargo began. Of course, I think it began much earlier for reasons I've explained. But What's interesting, Irina, in this book, Dr. Irina Scott actually reveals certain things about J. Allen Hynek, and there's some completely exclusively new published letters that he wrote and things like that. He had dealings with Jenny Randalls here in the UK, and one of the strangest things is that he had a meeting with Neil Armstrong, the astronaut from Apollo 11. Now, Neil Armstrong was always a quiet and shy man. He was withdrew. He withdrew from public life after the Apollo 11 mission. Buzz Aldrin was much more forward. He was much more willing to go on TV and talk and things like that. But Armstrong withdrew from public life. But it's pretty clear he had some kind of interest. For example, I know that Neil Armstrong, went with the expedition to find the Golden Library, the Taos Gold thing. That's in Ecuador, this ancient artifact that Philip Coppens talked about before he passed away. A strange place with his golden books. Neil Armstrong was part of the original expedition to try and find that in the early 70s. So it's pretty clear that he had some interest in the esoteric. And now, Aldrin has spoken openly about this, but the Apollo 11 spacecraft was shadowed by something alien when they were up in space. Now I know you're going to say, "Oh, Ben, you said they didn't go to the moon." All right, well, maybe they didn't, but whether the Apollo 11 mission went to the moon or not, for real, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, it did launch. I believe that Aldrin and Armstrong were in space, and that they had this encounter. I believe them when they said there was an encounter with some kind of strange being, or strange craft with beings in. I do take that seriously. I do believe them when they say that. Now Armstrong approached Hynek. When Armstrong actually spoke to Hynek, he could have phoned him up any time, he could have written to him, but it seems that Armstrong was worried about people finding out, because he actually went on a cruise. This was in the early 70s. There was a cruise on a cruise ship, and they went into the sea to witness the solar eclipse. And Hynek went along, and so did Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong, during the dining arrangements, he could have sat anywhere. Someone famous like him could have sat at the captain's table. But he specifically asked the stewards on the ship to put him next to Hynek in the dining room when they were serving chow. That is very interesting. Because maybe it seems that Armstrong distinctly wanted a private conversation with Hynek. He distinctly wanted to get to Hynek where no one could hear him. It was on a ship miles out at sea. It was probably the only chance he could do that without being overheard. So, the story continues, everybody. This, of course, it's going to go on. It's only just over halfway through this series. I'm going to be watching more of it. It's all very interesting. Gets a bit gruesome at times. I mean, there's one of the things that the agents do, the Soviet agents, is they kill the Hynek's neighbour because she's too nosy. I don't want to laugh, no, but they actually shoot her and they have to dispose of the body and things like that. I'm putting spoilers in, but I mean, I've got to discuss this openly. It's I'll put a warning actually in the titles. There's a spoiler's going to be included. But yeah, I do watch it. Please do go and watch Project Blue Book. It's really, really good. In fact, it's excellent. It's like I've just explained. It has these concepts that you don't see. I don't think I've seen in any other UFO fiction. Even the X-Files doesn't have some of the concepts I see in Project Blue Book. It's really, really good. It's really great. Fantastic. So what will happen next, I don't know. But like I said, I'm going to make another video about this. I'm going to make another video about Project Blue Book. It may well be another live stream. I'd like to do another live stream, actually. I haven't done one for a while. By the way, I hope you like these new lighting effects. I've changed the lighting effects slightly on this particular set. So just have a look through that and see what you think. But also do read Irina's book. This is really excellent. About perfect timing, Project Blue Book coming out. Of course, this is Project Blue Book. So in 2019 represents the 50 years since Project Blue Book ended, and therefore supposedly 50 years since the US government ever investigated UFOs. We know they lied now because we know about ATIP. So what else have they lied about, guys? Well, it turns out they were lying from the very beginning about Blue Book. I say more about that in the live stream, and I'll say more about that in the next video in this series, because it is time that we do look into the real story of Project Blue Book along with the TV fictional element, because the relationship between the two is absolutely fascinating. So, I'm looking forward to watching the other episodes, and I hope you'll join me when I discuss them on Panmo TV. Thank you very much for watching Panmo TV, everybody. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.